Cleanup crew, huh? Okay, not too much pressure. Well, I am really, really excited to talk to you today.
Same.
And I think this is going to be a really fun conversation. So let's just jump into it.
Go for it.
Anthony, you have had such an interesting career. What is it like leading marketing for a portfolio of global women's beauty brands?
So if you've ever heard of Edgewell Personal Care, we're a holding company. We own a lot of number one and number two brands, consumer products brands in a number of different categories, like Banana Boat and Hawaiian Tropic Sunscreen, Playtex Fem Care, a bunch of luxury prestige brands like Jack Black, and then I personally oversee our hair removal portfolio of brands, namely Schick, which is comprised of a number of different sub-brands like Hydro Silk, Intuition, and then we actually own Skintimate too, which you probably know is a shave gel brand. And leading a portfolio of brands, specifically women's brands, which I'll focus on today. Full disclosure, I'm a dude, so personally, no interest in them, outside of work. But what it's forced me, and it's been a great learning experience because it's really forced me to focus on understanding the consumer and drop any personal biases or perceptions. I have to focus as hard as possible on really putting myself in the consumer's mindset. I've helped develop our consumer segmentation, which I hold very precious, and not in a Smeagol, precious kind of creepy way, but more like it's very, very important to me, and it's kind of like my guiding light for everything I do. We've done a lot of work like ethnographies, consumer one-to-ones, and I've used that to help shape how I think about why my brands and how to make my brands most relevant to a certain portion of consumers. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about dermaplaning today, which is an industry I helped, along with my team, scale up and really help create, because it really didn't exist prior to 7 years ago. So it's been a really fun exercise being a part of that. But that all went back to having a really thorough understanding of the consumer and figuring out this new trend I heard about how we could make one of our brands and deliver it to consumers and make it relevant. And it's been awesome scaling that up from nothing and now having it present in most major retailers throughout the country.
I mean, it's fascinating to think about it. You said 7 years dermaplaning. It wasn't even in the lexicon. I mean, no one was talking about that. Now you can't read a beauty magazine or talk to friends or go on social media without hearing about dermaplaning. So what was the aha moment for dermaplaning? I mean, you've done all this amazing consumer insight, and when did you see it really take off?
Yeah, so for me, there were really two aha moments. The first of which, this went back in 2015. I was in an innovation role, but one group of my consumers is super engaged with beauty. I mean, she's the type of woman, based on what she tells us, if she was on Mars alone, she would still go through her beauty routine because it's so important to her, and just she will not leave her house without it. There are very different groups of women who feel very differently, but for this specific group of women, I was researching skincare trends, and one thing I did, I actually sat down and had a conversation with a dermatologist and was asking her, what are you seeing? What's happening in your world? Just to get a different perspective on things. And she told me a lot of women were starting to come in for this treatment called dermaplaning. She's like, I take a blade and I essentially exfoliate the top layer of skin and all the vellus hair, which is AKA peach fuzz, off their face. And as soon as I heard that, my head almost exploded. I was like, oh my God. I started quickly, I'm a nerd, so I started quickly crunching all the numbers in my head. I was like, X number of women in the US, doing this once a month, changing their blade every month. I was like, this is a really big category opportunity. And the more I started looking into it, I was like, really no brands are doing this. And obviously going back to the consumer, I started thinking, okay, which of my brands in the portfolio could my brands credibly deliver this? Because frankly, based on what women told us, to get a woman to take a blade and scrape it across her face, there was a big leap there. So I had to think through, okay, can my brand credibly deliver this to women, and does it make sense for us? And we started doing some of the research, and it was like, yes. So that first aha moment was when the dermatologist told me that this was even a trend. Fast forward a couple of years, and COVID hit. And going back to a thorough consumer understanding, you'll see that's the big theme of how I bring my brands to market is, again, going back to that woman who, if she was on Mars, she would still groom. And once COVID hit, what I knew about my consumer was a lot of them went to salons or spas for things like brow shaping, facial hair removal, waxing. And once COVID hit, I think Gabrielle from Mars said it this afternoon. Everyone was quarantined for anywhere between 6 months to 2 years, and I said to myself 2 weeks into this thing, I was like, I don't think this is going to sit too well with my consumer. So I quickly had my team turn, and what I said to them was, I think dermaplaning is at a tipping point because it had been growing prior to COVID, but I think we're at a tipping point. And what we're going to do is start testing different messaging. Like, let's turn this around quickly. And we started testing different messaging. And I think, I wouldn't even call it A/B testing. It was more like ABCDE testing. Tested multiple variations of messages. And I think the one that resonated was like 6 words. It just, again, we turned it around in like a week. It said brow shape and dermaplane at home. And the engagement on it went like through the roof. And that's when I said, okay, I think we're really onto something here. And I said, based on what I know about my consumer and what I know about my brand, that she's telling me she trusts me for this. I think we need to be the first brand to really take the leap and start pouring meaningful amounts of dollars into this because there's really an opportunity here to help scale the category up and become a leader here.
That whole trajectory is just so interesting and cool to listen to, that it happened in a dermatologist office. And then I imagine you probably were like, let me ask a couple of women if this is a real thing.
Yeah, exactly. There was I can tell you there was a thorough amount of consumer research done to make sure we had the right product proposition, to make sure the product delivered well, to make sure we were talking about it right. Because I can tell you there are very specific ways that resonate really well with the consumer and specific ways that are an immediate turnoff. So we had to think through all of that, and then just figuring out the right product concept and proposition was a fun experience.
That's awesome. So how did you leverage an entertainment strategy to connect to your consumers? And sort of another part of that is, how do you keep authenticity at the core of your approach, which is so central to this product specifically?
Yeah, so when we decided to start leaning into this harder, when I really thought we were at a tipping point where we could meaningfully change consumer behaviors, because again, when COVID started, I think every woman's perception and how they interact with salons changed. And I said, I think we really have to change we have the opportunity to change behavior beyond this, whatever this COVID period is. At first I thought it was like 2 weeks, and my wife was like, you might want to revisit that conversation. So having a good wife who supports me is very important too. But as far as the entertainment strategy goes, everything I do, I try to think through, how are we going to make a consumer's life better? Like, what really makes her tick? What are the insights and her motivations of why she does things? How can we add value into, I also market men's products, but how can we add value into this person's life? And I worked very closely with our consumer communications agency, Edelman, at the time, and had a really good heart-to-heart on like how consumers' lives have changed. And at the time, it was during COVID, everyone was wearing masks, so like a lot of women's perceptions of beauty changed because lips were no longer the center point of your face. You're walking around like that all day. And they brought us an idea for a program called Brow Talk. And what that was what it essentially wound up being was, the rules of communication have changed. So we saw the opportunity to bring to women some education on how they could talk with their eyebrows and communicate differently now. And by the way, if you want to groom your eyebrows, we have tools that can help shape your eyebrows. And if you want to go as far as dermaplaning, we can solve that for you too. So we launched the whole campaign, partnered with a woman named Madison Bailey. If you've seen Outer Banks on Netflix, she's the star. She plays Kiki on that. She was really mediable, really likable, and we thought was the perfect fit for this. So we partnered with her and a slew of micro influencers. Again, that kind of went back to how we approach things authentically. I know everyone says that now with influencers, but this was a little like 2.5 years ago, so it was a little bit more novel at the time. Partnered with a number of micro influencers and launched this whole content series about Brow Talk. A number of different videos with the different ways you can like show your facial expressions, like angry or excited or things like that. And we saw a ton of consumer engagement there. It was executed across most of our social and earned channels. And within like 6 to 8 months of launching that, we became the #1 selling beauty item on Amazon, which was super exciting for us.
That is an incredible feat. As you're talking through this, I'm thinking, so how does this relate to the trend? Have you guys heard of this? The no eyebrow look? This is a thing, right? So have you heard of this?
I have heard of it, yeah.
So, that is pretty good for your brands, I would think, right?
Yeah,
that's grooming all the way, right? You're just taking them off.
There's a lot of different trends. So there's the no eyebrow trend. There was Y2K eyebrows.
Oh, I don't even know what that is.
So that was a lot of women in the past like 3 to 4 months. It became a TikTok trend. Women started, because I think nowadays what's become more popular is eyebrows that are like, I don't want to say unkempt, they're like fuller and a little bit more ungroomed. Back in Y2K, which I was a little disappointed it became a retro trend since I was in high school then. I didn't think it was that long ago, but anyway. what became a trend, what the trend was then was like thinner, more finely shaped eyebrows. And that became a trend on TikTok. And we decided, hey, anytime consumers are grooming their eyebrows, we want to be a relevant part of the conversation. So again, our dermaplaning products can do a number of different things, brow shaping being one of them. So we jumped on that trend as well. Activating and letting consumers know we can help you get whatever look you desire.
It's awesome. You're right there in the middle of it.
Try to be.
So you did mention the success of being Amazon's #1 recommended product in this category, which is just an incredible accomplishment.
Yeah, it was actually the number one selling product. It was like,
#1 selling product, excuse me. And that doesn't come without an amazing team. And so how do you lead in a digital first, aka virtual world that we're in?
yeah, so I've been really fortunate. Like I have a team of 15 marketers under me. Social media influencer leaders, brand strategists, brand architects, and digital media leaders, as well as a cross-functional team like our e-com team, our supply chain team, our product team. And the whole thing was really a team effort. I was one of the leaders on it, but I've been really fortunate to be surrounded by an incredible team of folks who all, I tried to set everyone, we have a common goal. This is all what we're trying to do. And it was wild doing it. I can tell you it was wild doing it digitally because at least the perception I had before I started working on beauty products was that a beauty company kind of looks like walking into a Sephora. It's a bunch of people who are very passionate about makeup and almost like a Devil Wears Prada type office, super passionate about it. And I just laugh looking back on it because I'm one of the leaders of becoming the top selling beauty item on Amazon. I did this literally from my basement, which is full of video games and gym equipment, not what you would picture at all. But yeah, it came down to establishing common goals. And, when it comes to leading my team, I think the biggest things I try to have us focus on and the way I lead my team are creating a sense of trust, which is not easy to do, I think, for a lot of people. But I put the trust in my team and said, look, listen, half of you are literally fully remote now. I haven't met a couple of my team members yet, but we've been working together for 2 years now. Fully remote. I trust them. Another thing I do is try to set clear expectations and ways of working to say, okay, here's what we all need to do. We all agreed on when we're going to be in office, when we're going to be out of office. And I think having input to that, my team really appreciated because they felt like they had skin in the game, no pun intended, if you will. The other things I've done are I treat everyone the same, whether I'm face-to-face or remote. I give everyone, I think my team appreciates the sense of kind candor I address them with. When something goes wrong or when something goes well, I address them with a certain level of feedback. I say what needs to be said, but I say it in a kind way that's constructive. And I think that's benefited us as a team because we can have honest conversations with each other. And then I think one of the last things is just listening and empowerment. I take their feedback very seriously. I try to be very responsive to it. And I also let them know that they're empowered to do things their way. Again, I'm literally not sitting even in the same office, but I'm not going to hover over them. I'm more focused on the outcomes and the results, and I will engage with them as much as need be to help get there. And I think that's benefited us. Then the other thing is just trying to do fun team building events virtually, which was a little weird at first. I'm assuming everyone went through that. I always try to see the benefit to things, and yes, being apart I think sucked for a lot of people because you just couldn't have that one-to-one interaction. But the way I tried to look at things was, well, yes, things are different now that we are no longer together in the same room, but there were also different things this has done for us. You're literally in someone's house 24/7, which sounds a little weird, but I was let's take advantage of this. And one thing we did was, I'm sure everyone's experienced this, was there were dogs barking in the background, cats climbing in front of the screen. And I think my team felt uncomfortable with it at first. And I was like, you know what? I was like, we're going to do what I'm calling Petapalooza. And I was like, we're all just going to gather online one day for lunch informally and just meet each other's pets. And I think that really helped just break the ice because I was like, you can't really do that in the office, but because there's allergies and things like that. But virtually it wound up being a really fun experience for everyone, just, shooting the breeze and meeting each other's dogs and cats and whatever. So it was cool.
Kind candor, I love, right? I'm taking that and appropriating it, as well as Petapalooza. We have to do that. I mean, that is a no-brainer, right? I mean, that is amazing. That is one of the best virtual ideas I've heard.
Thanks.
So, and your team must love that and love that about you.
The feedback I've gotten was positive. I know who knows what's behind closed doors, but I think they're pretty open and honest with me, and they give me positive feedback on it.
So regarding talent, how do you bring in good talent, but it's also so important to retain talent when things are changing so rapidly right now?
Yeah, so I can say opening roles up remote has been a game changer for us because listen, we're up in Shelton, Connecticut, which is not like, completely honest, it's not like the mecca center of consumer products marketing. However, going remote, it's enabled us, like if you just play the numbers game, there are probably a pool of 2,000 candidates up near Shelton, Connecticut. But if we open things up nationally, it's opened us up to hundreds of thousands of people. And I now have what I consider some world-class marketers out from Ohio, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Texas, that all sit on my team now. And I can tell you they would not have uprooted their families and their lives and moved to Connecticut, but I now have daily interactions with them, and they're supporting my business, all being remote, which has been pretty cool.
Yeah, that is really cool. I mean, it just opens it up exponentially.
Yeah, exactly. And I know.
Talent.
Exactly. And I know there's benefits and trade-offs for remote is not for everyone. I know everyone struggles with it, and I try to keep an open mind about things. And that goes back to like listening and taking feedback from my teams into account to make sure that they are feeling good with how we are doing things.
Great. So, so leaders that you've had during your career, which ones would you say have impacted you and why? And the second part of that I'd love to know is, what was the biggest lesson that you've taken with you from other leaders?
Yeah, I would say I've been really fortunate to have a hot streak of good leaders. My first leader I had was probably the most impactful. He was a brand manager at the time when I was like our punk intern at the time. And he was very instrumental in what he calls taking me from being a bro to being a pro, teaching me to become like a more polished professional version of myself. He was like, don't lose your personality. To have a polished version of it, so like to prepare yourself, for more like C-suite executive engagement. And I think that, along with the biggest thing I took from him, was just how to simplify the complex. To take because we have a million analytics, we work with all different sorts of retailers, but what he taught me how to kind of like see the clarity in a situation, really focus on the big picture, really focus on what you're trying to do as a company, and that's helped me. I know the way I coach my team now is I don't like to say I manage my team, I coach them, and what I try to help them do is also see kind of like provide clarity and simplify very complex situations to allow them to focus on what matters. And then the second thing, there have been a lot of lessons I've learned from all the different mentors I've had. I think the biggest thing is it's kind of an amalgamation of everything I've had from the past like 3 to 4 managers. I best can sum it up in a Maya Angelou quote. And this, I think, applies to me both as a team leader and as a brand marketer. Is like, it's going to sound cliche when I say it, but it's, you've probably heard the quote. It's people won't remember what you said or what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And to me, like, again, if you think about that both as a team leader and a brand marketer, because people don't buy on function, they buy on emotion as much as we like to think we buy rationally. We all don't, including myself. That's the thing I try to keep most in mind when thinking back to my consumer strategy is how can I make him or her or they feel a certain way.
Did you ever have doubts or questions about being in the women's beauty brand space? Did you ever think, oh, I'm a bro, this is not going to work for me? How did you sort of manage that?
I think I had watched and admired some of my past leaders do it, and I kind of observed how they did it from afar. Like, they probably didn't even know I was watching them, but I paid close attention to how they interacted with things. And I'm like, I just have to like dial up my feminine side and understand this stuff. And so I'll spend time watching TikTok videos, browsing through like Pop Sugar or Bustle or, many of those female focused websites. And that's been one thing I think that's helped me a lot. But of course there's doubt in your mind. I think whenever you take a leap and do something new, there's certainly doubt in your mind. I have the same doubts when marketing men's products because there's a lot of different groups of guys out there. Like, I'm not representative of the population, and I realize that. And I take a similar approach to whether I'm marketing to men or women, just making sure I really understand the consumer group and what makes them tick. So I think it's natural to have felt doubt. It's not to say I'm completely confident still. And one of the other things I do is also, I have a lot of women on my team. I listen to them just to make sure I get feedback. I'm like, am I way off base here? And please, I encourage them to like respectfully challenge me. And that's one of my other leadership principles, just generally, is like open dialogue and challenge each other. But I also listen to the women on my team. I'm like, am I off base? What do you think? And take their feedback seriously.
Well, you clearly must be doing something right. I'm just thinking about, as you're talking, your TikTok and your Instagram. I mean, do you guys on your team, do you break it out? Like, you follow these guys, you follow these ladies. Like, how does that work? Do you have segmentation? There's just so much to keep on top of.
Yeah, so we recently, I helped us build out a social team. It's one of the things we've taken in-house recently, organizationally, is our social capabilities. And they are, again, it goes back to, I had a conversation with our social team leader, like, here are our consumer targets broadly, like, gave her the prerogative to say, okay, where should we be playing the most socially based on our consumer? Like, because we can see, okay, how much is its consumer interacting with Facebook versus Pinterest versus Instagram versus TikTok and whatever have you. And I think we've kind of let the consumer lead us to say, okay, here's where we need to focus most of our energy based on like the influencers she's engaging with and the platform she's engaging with. It's not to say we turn a blind eye to everything else, but it's really the choices we've made of where to put our efforts.
Great. And my final question is, so what is your advice to young marketers that are looking to grow into a C-level role?
Yeah, I think the biggest things that have helped me are, one is it goes back to just understanding your audience, your consumer, and making them like the epicenter of everything you do. And I think if you do that, it provides a lot of clarity to your world. The second is stepping back and just saying, okay, what is my company trying to do, and how can I play an active role there? Like taking a step back and say, okay, I'm creating this influencer video, not for the sake of creating an influencer video, but it's to convince women that we are a superior beauty product, or we deliver, X for your brows or your dermaplaning. It's trying to step back and understand how your puzzle piece fits in the broader puzzle. I'd say the other thing is try to find an organization where your input is valued. I can tell you, I've been really, really fortunate to have worked on some of the strongest advertising, based on our research and like the history of my company. And a lot of the success we've had has come from, like input from assistants or associates on my team. I know like at a lot of companies, advertising's done at like a senior manager, director, VP level. I've made a cognizant effort to include a lot of the newer, like younger or greener employees, I should say, that don't have a lot of experience, because they can bring a really good perspective. So I'd encourage anyone young to find a place you're valued and where your input's valued, because I can tell you it's been a game changer for me just asking their opinions, because they've given input that I would have never even thought of. So I think that's probably the other biggest thing. And then if I had to pick anything else, I would say don't feel bound by your project list, like what your manager gives you. If you see an opportunity for your company, it's just like with dermaplaning, for instance, for me, that wasn't even on my manager's radar. And I said, hey, based on what we're trying to do with our consumer, I think this makes an incredible add to our strategy. So go through the right channels, like don't step on anyone's toes, but put a business case together. If you think there's an opportunity, put the rationale together and have conversations with the right folks in your organization who can enable action.
Great. Do we have any time for a question? Any question? No? Oh, okay. Any questions? Nothing? No? No?
How are you measuring success with your influencer work? Are you doing any kinds of measurement studies?
That's a really good question. So I think like a lot of folks, we're still figuring out exactly the best way to measure it. There's a combination of things we're doing. So we're obviously doing like marketing mix studies, and influencer work is a part of that. Some of our influencer partners, they'll help us do like brand lift studies, things like that, so we can specifically understand the impacts not only to sales, but the things that really keep me up at night. What is the impact to our brand message takeaway, overall brand perceptions? I think those are probably two of the bigger things. And I think more broadly speaking, like to me, there's kind of a data arms race going on, is like trying to, what company can figure out first how to tie all the different efforts in your marketing mix more immediately to sales. I'll frankly tell you, we're not there yet. So we're able to measure ROI at a high level after like campaigns ends, able to measure brand health impact after campaigns end, I should say. And then we'll obviously get a lot of the social metrics from our channels too, like engagement rates, conversion rates, things like that. And so I don't look at just one data point. I try to take everything into account. Is it perfect? I'll be the first to say no, but it's based on where the industry is at this point in time. It's, to my knowledge, it's the best tool we have available, like set of tools we have available to us.
Anything else? If not, I'll ask another question. So what are you hearing? What is the next beauty trend, right? You hear, you're in the know more than anyone. What do you think?
So I have to be careful with what I say, given what we're not all the way there yet. So then, as far as the next beauty trend, obviously it's going to sound cliche, but there's a huge focus on naturals and organics now, and I try to stay very in tune with that. Honestly, I don't think dermaplaning is all the way there yet. I'll tell you, the household penetration on it is not anywhere near what it is for other grooming products. And I think we can get it there. It's going to take time. It's still at the lower end, I would say, of becoming a more mainstream trend of like that's mass adopted behavior. So to me, you're going to still see a lot of that in the news over the next like 2 to 3 years, most likely. And then beyond that, I'll keep that close to the vest now, like, because I don't want to give too much away what we're thinking about.
That makes sense. Totally understand. All right. Well, thank you so much for your
Thank you.
time. This is amazing. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for listening and for coming.
Cool. Thanks.